must be counted to the united and one. In this land we are discounted. Got to end all division amongst men now. So many have been replaced. Without power, money brings pain. There's no reason to be anxious. Got to stand up and rise again now. All over the world, people are changing. Changing, my God, for the better. All over the world, people are changing. Changing.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, Daryl.
Good afternoon, Facebook, and good afternoon, social media. We have one heck of a show for you today. We have Senator Franson. She's going to talk about the legalization bill, and she's joining us live momentarily on the Wake and Bake show with Ed and the rest of the team. We just introduced ourselves to the senator staff, and she'll be joining us momentarily. So, given that, so there's not a bunch of dead space, why we're waiting for her, does anybody have a quick joke they can tell? I see we don't have a lot of comedians here.
Everybody's still muted.
All right, what do you got, Rose?
How many tickles does it take to tickle an octopus?
10 tickles. 10 tickles.
Ooh, 10 tickles. 10 tickles.
That's a good one.
Thanks, Rose. So we're going to be talking about the House and Senate bills in the Minnesota legislature, HF 600, and I believe the companion bill in the Senate, if I'm not wrong, Jess, is SF 757.
I believe that sounds correct.
Are we going to be going over like specifics of the bill and have a question and answer session, or is it just like a general overview of what legalization is going to look like with those bills?
Well, Senator Franson is here right now.
Yay. Welcome.
Hello, Senator. Hello, Senator. This is Daryl from Maplewood. I was trying to entertain the group while you got here. I didn't do very good on my jokes, but a couple of the other ladies, they saved me on a joke. Rose told a joke about an octopus. So now we're here to talk about the real stuff. Full legalization of cannabis and why it's important to Minnesota to do so. So thank you for being here.
You're muted, Senator.
Thank you. I was just having another conversation with someone about it right prior to this meeting, who's doing some research work for his school for his PhD. So yeah, all on board. So how do we want to tackle it?
So I guess the group sent over about 10 questions to you. They all formulated them this morning. We didn't get them over to you with a heck of a lot of time, but there are a few people on this group that made them. Everybody that made those questions is in this chat right now. So if you would like them to just kind of tackle one by one, or if you want to give us a small summary of what the bill is intended to do and when you think that it actually might reach the governor's desk and what our steps would be to help you make sure that this gets passed.
Sure. So you probably, most of you know the history of where I came from, working on this issue, trying to get people educated on adult use cannabis. And I like using the word or the phrase adult use cannabis versus recreational cannabis, because I think people try to make it sound like it's, just something you do for fun, but we know that responsible use of cannabis, including the medical cannabis program, has been known to be very beneficial to a lot of Minnesotans, and a lot of Minnesotans can't afford the medical program. So legalizing adult use cannabis would also help folks that cannot afford it. It also would help veterans who can't have access through the VA. So those are some of the issues that I was concerned about when, we had one bill that was introduced prior to mine a couple years ago that received a hearing when Colorado legalized, and of course there's different schools of thought of how that went, but fast forward to now, there's so many other states that have legalized, and now on our borders in South Dakota, Illinois, we're just getting closer. It's getting closer and closer to Minnesota, so you can't ignore the issue. And we can't ignore the issue because it's always been here. And now that we have even more data of how communities of color have been disproportionately impacted by prohibition is not working, it's something that I have looked at it from the legal side, from the expungement side, from the access to justice side, and to if we do legalize that, we also have a way to repair past harms from prohibition. So having an equity lens of how we're going to allow for licensing and to benefit from the industry in terms of the economic opportunities for businesses, et cetera. So those are things that are in the legislation. The legislation is bigger now than ever, because when I first took the issue on, I was looking at other states, and we were trying to put together a bill that would really look at the best model for Minnesota. And I remember having one of our conference rooms with literally pretty much every legal mind in the Senate, all the attorneys that for different areas, because it touches everything from judiciary to public safety, health and human services, Department of Health, commerce, you name it. A bill dealing with legalization touches on every single aspect of state government. So we do need a good approach. I think what the House has done with the leadership of Representative Winkler in terms of going around the state and capturing people's, background, experience, and stories, it's made the bill better. And it's probably like an inch thick, so I'm still combing through, but what I know about the structure of it and making sure that it's actually the best template for Minnesota to be a model in legalization of adult use cannabis, and keeping the taxes down or low, so we don't also have the unintended consequences of still having a black market. So we want people to know what they're putting in their bodies, to know that it's being properly regulated, it's being labeled, that the funds that are coming in are to enforce the law, enforce the legalization framework, so it's not out of reach for people and not exacerbate an issue. So those are things that are being thought through. And certainly the bill is not final. We want your input, and we want your background and your experiences on how to make this even a better bill. And we certainly want your support. We want you to help us educate others, educate people like me. I'm a suburban mom. I'm from Puerto Rico originally, so I'm not the criminalization aspect. And I worked in the public defender's office when I was in law school, and reading police reports and knowing that once you have your young kid and has a felony because of possession of cannabis, it doesn't go away easily. It actually can ruin your future. So how do we do the expungement in a way that is fair and certainly opens doors for people to get back to work and maybe be part of the industry if they so choose. So those are kind of a little bit of the background to the bill in the Senate. When I first introduced it with Senator Jensen, he got me a hearing. He got us a hearing, and it went down in flames in the Judiciary Committee with Warren Limmer. So it was kind of like a setup, but it was a good education. I think people are starting to talk about it and learning more about it. And like I mentioned, as a suburban mom, there's a lot of skeptics. And I have two little kids, a 5 and a 4-year-old that I know that little boys will maybe someday experiment with cigarettes and alcohol. And I want to make sure they know what they're putting in their body, and that they're they're not going to be laced with something that's going to hurt them. So it's inevitable. It's a matter of time. It's not if, but when. And I think people are starting to notice. I mean, there's 2 legalization parties in Minnesota, so it's political. People want this. It's a single issue that people want us to do, and I think it should happen. And I know that there's people who have questions, and it's our job to answer them and help them. I don't have all the answers, but I have a lot of allies and partners and advocates in this area that can help us answer them and bring some truth to this issue, and certainly do it in a way that's responsible, and give another issue that's been talked about is mental health, as well as public safety, mental health, because your brain keeps developing until you're age 25. So on the medical side, a lot of concern with that, but also knowing that alcohol, you have a 21 legal age, and it arguably does much more harm at any age than cannabis. It's about educating people, educating our kids. And I would say that on the law enforcement side, we want to be able to give the tools, right? We don't have a breathalyzer test that's readily available, but technology will get there, and we'll give the tools to do this in a responsible way, not targeting communities, but helping people. And the law is the law. Right now, you can't drive impaired anyway, so we're not changing that. You can't drive impaired with your prescription drugs. You can't drive impaired because you're tired, right? It's illegal if you do something wrong in your car. So that's not changing. So we're trying to educate people so they know what their capacity is for tolerance. So we need to study this issue too. We need to have the federal government also decriminalize and make it legal, so we are able to have more education on the benefits of cannabis, and how we can get more technology to know what people's tolerance level is, just like we know, for instance, on beer and wine, and we do it casually now, but certainly at one point we had prohibition, so I don't see it much different than that. And we have the will and the experts and the people around to help us do it in a responsible way.
Well, thank you for that. I see the social equity piece and the inequities of particular communities. I see that as being a big thing. It's being talked a lot about in the other bills in other states. They're really focusing on that. I also see the expungement piece being a real issue to some members of this group, and how do we expedite the expungement piece without having to go through the longevity of the courts and the long process that it typically takes for a full expungement? And how do we explain the difference between a real expungement versus something that might be partial, or something that might be still viewable during a certain employment situation or something like that?
So what I know, and we are working in partnership with the Attorney General's office, because the intent is that all cannabis minor offenses will be automatically expunged from the record. It's those that are kind of blurry, kind of maybe more that there might be a level of crimes that we will have to look at, and there will be a process how they would be adjudicated, but the lower level offenses that I don't have the language right in front of me, it will be done in an orderly fashion, that it won't be a burden that you don't have to apply. You would automatically get expunged if your offense is listed as one of those that would not need further review. Does that make sense? So I would think felonies would be probably something you have to look at more, but maybe non-violent crimes of misdemeanors and of that nature would automatically be expunged. So you wouldn't have to spend the money to hire an attorney to go plea for your expungement. It would just automatic. So it actually works equitable, because we know that communities of color would be harmed if we made you pay for an attorney to go ask for an expungement and get that process done, which could be very cumbersome.
I know a couple of members of this group had that question, so.
The question was more of expungement versus stay of conviction, and using the different terminology because of the meanings behind them. And the question is, are you looking at changing that terminology from expungement to stay of conviction?
Okay, that's a good feedback. and I can get you an answer. I don't have one readily at my hand, but I'll bring that up because that's a good distinction.
I had seen something that said the level of it. Like, so I got a 5th degree felony possession, small amount. Well, that, I mean, so something like
Yeah.
that, I have to really apply.
5th degree is the smallest amount. It should just drop off.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's when this was 8. I don't know if it will qualify, and we'll have to work with all of the with the judiciary just to make sure that where do we feel like it's the right cutoff. But maybe even if it's not automatically, if it doesn't rise to the aggravated felony, you know, there's different layers of that, then that probably, I can't say for certain at this point, but I think there might be some that will need further review, like I mentioned. But a possession one is what I think the intent is, that those would be hopefully be the ones that we agree to expunge automatically. And it's a negotiation, so it'd be something Representative Winkler and myself would want to make it in a way that is most equitable, looking at data of where people are at. But we know we're not the only ones working to pass this bill and to tinker with it. So we'll hear from all aspects. We know that law enforcement right now is not supportive of it. They have their concerns. We know that, like I mentioned earlier, some the medical community. But if we get them to a point that they're neutral, that they get some relief in maybe the way we word things, or maybe the expungement piece, or maybe the resources that we get to be able to properly regulate it, maybe we get to a point where we don't get opposition or resistance, but we can actually move the bill forward. So it takes some finesse, and maybe there are things that we won't bargain, right? Maybe we get to a point where it's like aggravated, 5th degree felony possession. I don't know. I can't say that right now, but those are things that are going to be talked about in Judiciary Committee more than any. I don't serve in that committee, so I can't say for certain whether that would be in your particular case. I think it was Corey, right, or Aaron, who mentioned that. That we'll look into it a little bit more and see where things are at. What would those layers be?
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Can we go with the next question? I don't have them in queue, so if somebody wants to just start firing them off, I mean, that's going to be your best bet to get her to answer them. I mean,
there is a question on the growing aspect of things. Matt had some questions, Matt's standpoint.
I can read the question that was presented to you. The home grow portion of the bill is a little, it needs some clarity. There's an allowance for the number of plants, but how are they going to differentiate between mature plants and non-mature plants? And also, when they're harvested, like
usable versus non-usable.
I think also a concern is just how much oversight is really going to be put into home growing. I mean, who's going to be going into all of these individuals' homes, to even see the plant count? Seems like a more reasonable thing. I mean, nobody's going to be maxing out their electricity and blowing the grid. That sounds like a more worst case scenario. Ensuring that there's no, commercial operations or black market operations are being done under the guise of home grow.
Yep, no, that's exactly right. And I think with input from all of you of what makes sense, I think we have a lot of voices in this issue, but we need to hear as many as possible to see where people feel is it's not just responsible, because we also know that people they might want to grow, and there might be, maybe we say, these are all regulations that also have to be worked out with whatever department's going to be overseeing it, whether it's going to be the Department of Health, which is unlikely because they want to tell you not to smoke or not to educate you on the negative parts, but we also, maybe it's going to be in a separate entity. All those things will be fleshed out. But can you, for instance, do we tell you exactly how to plant and grow and where in your home? I mean, those things can be very cumbersome. One thing that I at one point thought about was the whole restriction of people who rent. If they're not able to grow because they're renting and they are in someone else's complex, how do we deal with that? So those are all issues that are real life issues that we might not think or you might oversee in legislation, but we need to have, we can't be silent on them because it's subject to interpretation. So we look to you guys to help us frame those. Because a lot of people say, oh, you just need 2 plants, one mature and one not. But what if one doesn't, it's not as simple as that.
And I think home growing rights goes to just to addressing a major problem with the medical industry here and then the legal industry in a lot of the states that do exist recreationally, with adult use. In that the price is still there, and for a lot of patients, people that do receive a lot of benefit from this plant, it's outpriced. And so home growing offers a real solution to that. But then at the same time, there's that barrier, the health barrier, and the ability to be able to grow those plants. And I think a patient caregiver model, I know it's kind of not the term being used in any of the language of the bills, but maybe an avenue of something like that in the home growing rights for somebody to be able to grow plants for another person. And I think that's somewhat included in the transfer and stuff like that, and no penalty,
I have questions about, we're talking about home growing and we're talking about, at some point, we're going to have a discussion about quantities of purchase. We don't do this at all with alcohol or tobacco in any way. Why are we even considering putting these restrictions in place if we're now saying that this is a legal product to have and to grow and to consume? Yes, it is a product that may be dangerous in its own ways or may have concerns for people, but we also have those same concerns for a lot of products that we openly allow people to have as much as they want, consume as much as they want, and produce as much as they want, as long as they're not selling it commercially, because that is a code violation. Or they're out driving illegally, because those are other laws. Why are we restricting what some person can have?
Well, that's a great question, and I would say we do restrict some things like growlers, and we're in the middle of that debate right now. It's a separate subject. I understand it, but I agree with you that once we give you a prescription, right, you take it home. We expect you to be safe and keep it away from your kids and your pets. This is just a different. I think people need to be educated. Like you are saying right now, we have to educate people. Like, we're going to be responsible. If we have many plants, then maybe we need a commercial license, and we have to apply for the commercial license. But what is the right number? And I have to say, once you put a number, I think we have to be really purposeful of what number that is and what we're willing to do, because it's going to be really hard to change it. So if it's too low,
that's why I asked what I asked.
Do I have to have a number? Am I given a number of how many potatoes or tomatoes or carrots or other product, things that are grown from the earth that I use? Why is there a number?
Even bottles of liquor. I can go in the liquor store right now and walk out with, them pushing cases of, and it's regulated.
And I understand from the production standpoint, like I could literally homebrew in my basement gallons upon gallons and gallons of alcohol. It's the problem once I try and distribute that. That's the illegal portion of it. Not having it or producing it or drinking it. It's the licensing and the taxing of it that is the illegal portion. And that's why we have laws to restrict people from selling their moonshine out of their basement.
Yeah, no, these are all valid points, and I'm not dismissing any one of them. That's a tricky place where we have to come together and see what are we willing to accept as conditions to legalization, because I don't think it's just going to happen in a vacuum. We like the medical program, it passed, but it was very, very restrictive. It is very restrictive to this day. Leaving a lot of patients behind and a lot of people without ability to purchase legally, and really in my mind still having a huge black market because you can't you can't afford the prescription. So what is it that we are able to pass in the legislature? And we're still educating members. I have a lot of people who are concerned, and it's not necessarily partisan. I just think people are not educated to the points you're making of why do we do this with any other product that comes from the earth, right? It's not moonshine. It doesn't have to be processed like a beer or wine. It's actually grows on this earth, and that's it, right? So maybe you have to give it some more TLC, but other than that, it seems it doesn't make much sense. And I think that's why I'm so interested in this debate, because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that we still have it criminalized, that we still have prohibition. So what we're trying to do is educate people on how we can do this responsibly, setting some guardrails so people feel like there is some controls in place, but it's not. But I think there has to be an argument for your individual consumer protections.
And I feel like there's probably going to be some backlash. I feel like there may be on the home growing rights, and I feel like as much discussion and misconceptions we can get out of the way on that topic, just because the reality of it is a really important avenue for those members who find relief in whatever way it is to do that in a medical way, in an affordable way, while also being able to experience the benefits of home gardening and having that connection with the plant. And so that sticking point is pretty important to a lot of members of this community. And yeah, I don't know if I have another point.
We probably have time for maybe one more question if we do it quickly. Because we don't want to tie up the senator too much. I do know she has another appointment at.
Well, and frankly, I'll leave. I don't know if I could put my number in the chat, and you guys can follow up with me, because I'm not the expert, and I'm trying to bring all the perspectives to the table and all the concerns and say, here's where we are, guys. What are we gonna do about this? I mean, because it's so I'm putting so that is my cell. I so far haven't censored anyone, so feel free to call me and text me, and we can have a one-on-one conversation too.
Well,
I think we should also.
Thank you, Senator.
Go ahead, Greg.
Thank you.
I was just going to address the pre-employment drug testing as a whole from a social equity standpoint. Why are we engaging into people's private lives from a corporate standpoint and limiting people's ability to make money? It's a huge issue. Also, there are housing situations where they make you take drug testing. All of what we do in our personal life is honestly none of the government's business, as long as we're not breaking laws. And this would be deemed a product that would be legal.
Yeah, and that's a big concern of you're working with heavy equipment and you're impaired. That's the whole impairment question, I would say.
100% understand that. Yep. Yeah. No, I'm talking about pre-employment drug testing.
Yeah.
I understand if you are on some sort of drugs, whatever they are, alcohol, whatever it is that makes you do something wrong at work. I understand that. But to dictate what I do in my personal life before I get there is really a struggle, because
so we don't want to discriminate because you're on cannabis.
Yep. And I look at marijuana, especially because it stays in the system so long and it pops on tests forever. So something I did 30 days ago has nothing to do with me and my work.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm one of the people who test positive for 90 days after not using, and so it's like for me to have to stop using my medical cannabis for that long of a period of time just to get a job, like, in which case I'd still be fired because it's, and it's for baseline jobs, not even heavy duty,
Once again, understand DOT restrictions and things like that for job safety. That is 100%. I mean, I cannot, as a bus driver, drink the night before and expect to drive a bus the next morning and think that I'm not going to have any trace of alcohol in my system and not be risking losing my job and being arrested.
Well, you don't have to convince me. I know that, and I've been in some corporate settings where in other states where it's known that people consume cannabis and it's fine, right? So I think it's part of the culture too, to get to a point where people understand that this is not going to impair you from doing your job. Certain jobs that require high risk, that's a different story. I agree. It's impairment on high equipment that you can kill someone, that's different. But to the point that we can get society to accept this as, something that is, for sure, if you have a medical card, there should be some protections, but the employer side, there needs to be something as well for employers to be able to, not also be liable, right, for certain accidents and so forth. So that's the balance. And I would ask you guys to help us figure that out.
Can I bring up one specific provision as it relates to this? And it goes to the home daycare and how it needs to be. There's some sort of declaration. I've read the bill a couple of times, and it's long, so I don't know specifically how it's worded, but some sort of declaration about the use of cannabis on daycare premises after hours has to be declared to the parents, which does seem, it goes to Greg's mention too of there's no limit to the amount of liquor I can buy from a liquor store, and there's no declaration to parents of their child care of what they do in their free time. Whereas in the bill it is specifically mentioned for cannabis use.
Got it.
Ultimately, I think a lot of us are looking at this. Why in any way would cannabis be restricted any greater than alcohol is? And that's just a flat out question that every legislator should be asked. Are you willing to change alcohol laws to match the cannabis laws you're currently placing? And would your communities accept those laws with their alcohol?
Yeah, fair question. Very fair question. And that's how I try to frame it. I actually talk about it in that same framework. It's like we have 21 years of age to legally purchase beer. Why do you want 25 for cannabis? Like, I get it. There's just got to be some personal responsibility there. So why make it more restrictive? So I don't want us to make the same mistakes we made with the medical program, that it's actually unworkable, that it actually doesn't create much change or much equity, and it just leaves us in a worse spot, frankly.
So Senator, to that point, we know that the governor, in the next 90 days or so, will be his emergency powers due to the pandemic and due to the loosening of restrictions to bars and restaurants and those things are coming under fire. So given that situation, there's bills in the legislature right now that Tina was introducing in her committee that would give protections for the governor's executive order on August 1st of 2020 to allow for curbside pickup and multiple caregivers, and it loosens the annual restrictions or the annual certification for patients. Is there a way that we can make sure that we keep those or introduce a separate bill so that those protections still are in place even after the governor loses his pandemic powers?
Yeah, absolutely. So Tina Liebling has a bill on that?
That's what I heard, yes.
Okay, and I can talk to, I think Senator Abler might be able to help us because he's pretty reasonable, I think. So on the Republican side, so let's figure out how we can make that happen.
We have a bill in front of him on Thursday. Let's see.
Let's
see how nice he's going to be to us.
I know. Listen, you guys, my email, I'll put it in here too. If you want more than a few minutes, like let's set something up individually, and feel free to. Jess is on here. Jess Gigon is my my LA legislative assistant. We'll schedule some time because I don't intend to be the expert, but I intend to be a voice of reason and try to get people moving forward to get this done in my lifetime. And I think we still have a lot of educating to do. It's a lot of politics, but for sure we want to do the best bill we can for Minnesotans and for people to have the ability to have the liberty to use responsibly, and just like we do for liquor and wine, and when you have a prescription, we can teach people how to be responsible consumers. Right now, we can't do that because it's prohibited from us even talking about legalization. It's not legal, so we're dealing with the aftermath of how people are demonized for possession and demonized for consuming a natural product. So I think we'll get there. It's a matter of time. Other states have gone there, and I think maybe even at the federal level, we can start with maybe the issue of banking, which is another issue of how people can get access to capital for starting their own business in this industry.
Well, thank you, Senator, for your time. It is very valuable during this time, even during a pandemic. So I thank you. It was an honor for you to jump on with us, and I'm sure the rest of the team thinks so as well. If there's any quick other comments or any last minute comments.
I'd like to say thank you as well for coming on. We do understand that there's a lot of work ahead of us, so hopefully we'll be able to get updates from you in the future as this moves forward.
Love to. Let's stay in touch.
Yep, thank you. You'll be hearing
Take
from me too.
Thank you. Be safe.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you,
You
Senator.
too.
Thank you.
Bye.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you also, Jess, for all your work.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Jess.
Thank you, Jess.
Thank you, Senator.
Bye. See you later, Bill.
So how was that, guys?
That was good.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
I think it went good.
Thanks for
That went real good. Let me go ahead and get us out of here, folks. We will go ahead and come back live onto the Wake and Bake channel in about 3 to 4 minutes. Thank you again.
Sweet.
One God we must be counted to the united and world one. In this land we are discounted. Got to end our division amongst men now. So many have been replaced with the power money brings pain. No. There's no reason to be anxious. Got to stand up and rise again now. All over the world, people are changing, changing. My God, for the better. All over the world, people are changing, changing for the better. To my people